from here, this temple.
And next.
Okay, I am Saron from Helsinki. Nice to meet you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, my name is Priya Devi Dasi. I am from Helsinki.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I'm Kama Gayatri Mataji, and very nice to see you again. Thank you for the last lecture, it was very ecstatic.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, my name is Heidi or Heidi, and I'm actually connected through Rishikesh through Chaupati, but I'm in Finland now. And thank you for the last time. So it was wonderful and so good to see you again and hear you again.
Anyone else?
Would Lisa like to introduce herself? Anyway, my name is Ambika Devi Dasi, and yes, I come from Finland, and I have lived at the Bhaktivedanta Manor in the ladies' ashram recently, but due to the pandemic, I have had to stay in Finland again. And yeah, here we are. I'm studying Srimad Bhagavatam for VIAG in Vrindavan, and yeah, nice to meet you all, and especially Malati Mataji. Thank you so much for coming to enlighten us with Prabhupada Katha. It's such a great honor to have you. Thank you.
Krishna. So just begin by chanting Jai Radha Madhava, because that was Srila Prabhupada's his habit normally before Bhagavatam or another class, but just for the memory, I will chant Jai Radha Madhava. Sorry. And hopefully you also can also chant. Do that. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari, Yasoda Nandana Brajajana Rana, Yasoda Nandana Brajajana Rana, Yamuna Tiravanachari, Yamuna Tiravanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Shri Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Paravajakacharya Sataris His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavin Ki Jai Namacharya Shiva Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. So you'll hear some noise in the backdrop, which I can't do anything about. It's the peacocks. And sometimes people will say, can you turn off the peacocks? But actually, they're not like that. You can't turn them off. And right now, it's peacock mating season. So they're calling out really loudly to attract attention. Just 1 sec. I need to get water. I forgot to bring some. Just 1 sec. Before I begin, I think on the last one, I introduced the book, A Bond of Love, Srila Prabhupada and His Daughters, which I'll show again. It's A Bond of Love, Srila Prabhupada and His Daughters, and it's 305 little interviews with lady disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And it's almost 600 pages, 595 pages. And it's just filled with wonderful, wonderful personal experiences of Vaishnavis, of lady devotees of Srila Prabhupada. And it's available on Amazon.com. And it's only $20 because we didn't compile this book to make money. We compiled this book to spread the glories of Srila Prabhupada. And today I will introduce another book that you may have heard about or maybe you have read. And this is by Shamsundar Das. We came together and were initiated together and married by Srila Prabhupada in 1967, January. And his book is in 3 parts. 2 parts are already out, 3rd part just now coming. But it's called Chasing the Rhinos with the Swami. And this is volume 1. And then volume 2, it's also Chasing the Rhinos, but part 2. And it's just told in a really wonderful mood of a person who was deeply affected by Srila Prabhupada's loving relationships towards all of us, deeply affected by his pure knowledge and his desire to spread that knowledge all around the world on behalf of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I mentioned that last time, how Srila Prabhupada single-handedly, really, he arrived in America alone on a passenger cargo, as a passenger on a cargo ship. And he had one mission in mind. He brought a small suitcase and 3 large boxes of the first volume of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's what he brought with him. Like now when people go traveling, there's so many things we have to bring. But Srila Prabhupada brought the treasure of love of God in the form of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam in 3 parts. So Shamsundar was the secretary of Srila Prabhupada for 2.5 years, traveled with him, assisted him. And during that time, I would also sometimes travel, and I would serve as his cook and say house cleaner, keep care of his quarters. So just recommended it. The book is a wonderful, people from all over, any culture have read this, who read this book, they describe it. This is a page turner. It means you just can't put it down. And his descriptions are very vivid and colorful that bring you into the picture and the presence of Srila Prabhupada. So again, Chasing the Rhinos with the Swami. I actually can't exactly remember how far I went last time, but I was just thinking that I will just speak, unless I already, if I did, and I'm repeating myself, just tell me, and then I'll just shift gears. But I thought I would mention a little bit about how I actually was first introduced to Srila Prabhupada, which wasn't in person. It was a few months before I met him. And at that time, myself and my boyfriend were living together, which was kind of common in those days, and I guess probably nowadays too. But in those days, there was a heavy influence from hippie life. I like to call it the hippie sampradaya. And so among some of the other things from the hippie mindset and was that we didn't really think marriage was a very important part of life. So basically, most hippies didn't bother to get married. So I was in that camp. And it was in a very unusual way that I even met my boyfriend. It was in the middle of a forest in Northern California. And in that area, many hippies were leaving the city and traveling to this area. It was called Mendocino. And so there was like not a wilderness, but forest, big redwood trees. And redwood trees are really very large, powerful trees. And so that area had been an area for lumbering, for, cutting down the trees to get their wood. And then when a certain area, they would finally cut down all the trees and they'd go somewhere else. So they would have like little places set up for the they're called lumberjacks. So the people that would be cutting the trees, they would make like a little, place where they could live during the time they were cutting the trees in a particular area. And then they would go on to somewhere else, and that area would be abandoned. So I was living myself in a house, a small place. So that had part of a little area that had been now abandoned by the lumber people because they had taken out all the trees in that area. And the very, very primitive, like no electricity, actually, no running water. He had like a water pump, and no working telephones. And of course, this is in the 60s, so definitely there weren't any, mobile phones, no cell phones. So during that time, I had left San Francisco, had come to this place on my own. And then for a while I had a roommate, but then that roommate, through a series of different incidents, thought it would be safer for her to leave that place. And I mean, actually, she was right. It wasn't such a safe situation, actually. But at one point, then I also decided maybe I would leave that area. Other friends had left the area, and everybody was heading for Mexico. So, I mean, I really had no idea what it meant. They're going to Mexico. There was like no plan, just like go to Mexico. So I kind of joined that. Okay, I'm going to go to Mexico too. But I just had no idea really what that meant, where I would go, but I was going to go. So I went out on the road, and it's called Highway 1. It goes from all the way to the southern part of California, up the coast to the top of California. And it's not a road that's so frequented like more of a major road, like we call it interstate, like a freeway. This is like, 2-lane road. And so I went out there, and the ocean is on one side, and then, the hills, the trees, whatever is there on the other. And like this, I was going to hit this, we do like this, we want to hitch a ride. We want to get a ride with somebody. So I'm just there with a little suitcase. I'm going like this, but there's not very much traffic. And some of the only traffic was a lumber truck. And I definitely didn't want to catch a ride with the lumber people because the reason my friend had left was she'd gotten some unfortunate incident with the lumber people. So we understood not such a safe thing for a lady to go into a lumber truck. So I'm waiting, and we didn't bother with time, didn't have a watch. And finally, there was a vehicle and it pulled up. And the guy goes down, hop in. Well, I noticed that vehicle was headed north, but I was trying to go south. So I didn't say anything. And he goes, well, where are you going? So I said, well, I'm trying to go to Mexico. He goes, well, how long have you been there? And I had no idea because I didn't have a watch. So I didn't answer that question. And then he just said, well, hop in, at least you'll get somewhere. And I did. I thought, well, yeah, that makes, with my foolish mind, that makes sense. I'm not getting anywhere going south, so okay, I'll get in this vehicle. And it turned out that actually I had met this person maybe a week or so prior in an even more strange situation, which was I was going to visit some friends who also lived in the area, a number of miles away, and they lived in the forest, in the interior, in what used to be the house of the former owner of the local tree cutting industry. So he had a nice house, and he had a part which he didn't live in anymore. And in that house, it used to have like a private club for the administrative people, the wealthier people who were part of the forest, cutting the forest. So I was going to go visit them. They were from San Francisco. We had known each other there, so I'll go visit them. And to get to that house, you have to go through a dirt road with some forestry on each side. And it was becoming dark, and to the point it was kind of dark. And I thought I heard a noise of like a voice, which would have been quite unusual to hear a voice coming out of the middle of nowhere in a forest and, just becoming dark. So I slowed down the car. I kind of like had my window open. I was trying to see where's that voice, and I kept hearing over here, over here. But over here was in the forest. So I thought, okay, so I started driving in the forest, and all of a sudden somebody jumped down right in front of the car from a tree. They'd been up in a tree. And the person explained that he had been taking a walk in the forest. He got disorientated. That's easy to do in the forest if you don't know where you are. He got disorientated. He was lost. So then it was dark, and he climbed up in the tree, and he was just waiting. He was looking like, we'll be there to see some lights. He was trying to get his orientation, and he saw my car headlights. And that's when he started shouting. So I brought him. It turned out he was staying with my friend. So I brought him there. So that was like a brief meeting. So now here I am in a van going north with this person that I really didn't know. And he told me he was going to Portland, Oregon, and that he had some really good friends there. And I would really like these friends. So when we got to Portland, Oregon, I met Jan and Joan. They were sisters, and Mike, who was a good friend of my boyfriend, Sam. And they had gone to college together in Portland. So I kind of like was without any plan in life, kind of staying there. And then Jan and Mike decided to go to New York. Actually, Mike decided, and Jan agreed to go with him. And Mike was a very good pianist. He was like particularly good jazz pianist. And he was thinking if he goes to New York, he could maybe meet some famous people. He could maybe get a career in music, So that was kind of the game plan. And Jen went along with him. And So then they're in New York, and we're all writing letters back and forth. That's how you communicated in those days. So stick it in a box, and then the letter would go and get to where it's going. They'd write back, so it took some time. It wasn't like this nowadays, you send an email, and if the person doesn't write you back in like 30 minutes, 30 seconds, you're thinking, what's wrong? Why don't they reply? Then we were just willing to wait for 10 days, whatever it took. So we had a nice exchange, and then finally we get a letter, and in that letter it said, we've met a Swami. So we'd met a few Swamis already before, but nobody had been somebody we thought we would want to follow. And in the meantime, my boyfriend was always saying, we need to get a guru, we need to get a teacher. And I didn't like that idea very much. I had a very foolish American lady mind. And I said, well, you can get a guru if you want, but I'm not going to have anybody tell me what to do with my life. I'm going to make my own mistakes. So that was, my attitude. And really, from the so-called gurus or swamis we met, there was never anybody who impressed us as being somebody who could teach us anything about life. So now they're telling us they met a guru. And Mike was a very sober person. A lot of times hippies are typified as, this getting stoned on drugs all the time. And that was quite true in many cases. But there were also very thoughtful people like Mike, and he didn't take drugs. He was a very thoughtful person, and he wasn't somebody to just follow along because that's the way it was, in society. So when they said they found a guru, I was kind of thinking, well, this is interesting because, I know he's thoughtful. He's not someone to just, follow blindly. So I was kind of curious what would happen. So the next letter said, well, they were going to get married. And that was quite surprising because, as I already mentioned, as hippie people, we didn't see marriage as something very attractive. So I thought, well, this Swami must really be something if, like they're going to get married, that was kind of impressive. And then Joan, the sister of Jan, decided she was going to go to New York herself and help be there at Jan's marriage and, help however she could. So that was really the beginning of the connection with Srila Prabhupada, with Swamiji, as we call him. Not face to face, hadn't read, hadn't even seen a book or anything at that point. But some interest was there because of, I have to say, because of Mike and his interest. In the meantime, so she's going to New York to help her sister in the marriage. In the meantime, myself and Sam left Portland rather suddenly. There was no plan. I came home, I had been shopping, I came home, and I see that the car, we had kind of a big car. In those days, they called it a station wagon, but nowadays, I guess they're called SUV. And it was a big old thing, and I saw everything was in there. Like, I looked in our little house, and there was everything from the house was now in the car. So I said, well, where are we going somewhere? I didn't know what to say. And he goes, well, I'm going, and if you want to come, hop in. And I was thinking, well, that's the second time you told me to hop in. First time was when I was hitchhiking and I ended up here, and now hop in again. So I hopped in, and we just started driving westward. And at one point I said, do you know where we're going? And he goes, no. Okay, so I didn't say anything. And then it was getting towards night, so he pulled in a national park. So in America, we have these national parks, and they're generally in places that are not greatly inhabited, and they're protected areas. So this was a gigantic, huge national park, and it was called Three Sisters. And the name Three Sisters came as there was like 3 mountains there, very tall mountains, big ones. And they were called the Three Sisters. So and these parks generally have an area for camping. So we pulled in, so we'll spend the night here, continue our trip wherever we were going to go the next day. So when I woke up the next morning, Sam wasn't there. I mean, he hadn't, everything was there. The car was there. He wasn't there. He'd gone out on a walk, it turned out. And when he came back, he said to me, well, I got a job. And I'm thinking, you got a job? We're in the middle of it's called wilderness area, you know. I'm looking and all I see is trees. And he explained to me that he met one of the forest rangers. So these big places, these wilderness areas, they're called forest rangers, and they protect the forestry and you know, try to keep people from burning down the forest or killing the animals in the forest. So he told he told Sam that the person who was supposed to be the lookout, means look out for the fires, that year, he'd been doing it for a number of years, and he just got married. And now his wife did not want to, the new wife, she didn't want to spend her honeymoon on top of a mountain looking for forest fires. And so the guy says, you know, so yeah, we're looking for somebody. And Sam loved nature. He loved woods. And he goes, well, I'd really be interested in that. And since we didn't have any other plan, you know, this could be a plan. So the man takes him, the forest ranger takes him up to the top of one of those Three Sister Mountains. And they set, which is known as an intentional fire. The fire was just enough to cause some smoke to see if Sam, who's now up on a tower, so you've got the tall mountains, and then there's a tower where the fire lookout sits up all day and just looks around for fires. And Sam, just like that, he caught it right away. So they were really impressed with him, and they offered him the job, and he accepted. So now, from not knowing where we're going, I knew that we were going to be going to the top of a mountain and spending our summer up there. So one day on a low risk day means there was really no chance of a forest fire that day. So they said we could have a day off. But then where are we going to go in the middle of nowhere? So we just went to another mountain and we camped out on the other mountain. And the next day we came back to our mountain and we noticed there was a car. That was really interesting. Like nobody came up there. To get up there was a really treacherous dirt road, just zigzag, one lane road to the top of the mountain. So when we opened the door of our cabin, we had a little wooden cabin. There was only a wood stove in there, and there was no bathroom facilities. A wood stove would provide heat, and then you could cook on it. For the bathroom, you just go out. There's a whole huge forest, and we had a stream, and the stream was such pure water, you could just go and drink that water. You know, I don't know nowadays if that could be possible, but at that point it was. And if you wanted a bath, you know, we fill a bucket, take it in, put it on a pot on the stove, warm it up a bit, and then just go outside and take a bath. So you could say simple living, you know. So we go open the door. I wonder who's here. And there's our friends. There's Jan and Mike and Joan. And they're on their way back from New York. And then things really got interesting. So, okay, now they're married. Jan and Mike are married. And not only that, they had new names. So Jan was now Janaki and Mike was now Mukunda. And Janaki was the first lady initiated by Srila Prabhupada. And Mukunda was among the first, this was like in the first initiation that took place on Janmashtami in 1966. The second initiation was about 15 days later on Radhastami. So here they were. And generally, you know, if somebody comes to your house, you want to offer them something, you know, offer them a chair, but they've already made themselves comfortable, and offer them some water, but they already took care of that. So, you know, but you want to offer something. So we said, well, would you like some LSD? Because we were still doing that. And they said, no, thank you. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. You know, first they meet a Swami, they get married, like they get new names. What's next? So, and no intoxications, no drugs. Okay, what's next? And then we found out they were vegetarian. Nowadays, that is no big deal. But I'm telling you, in the 60s, it was like vegetarians were looked at with great suspicion. It just wasn't any part of mainstream society. And I mean, people would practically consider you to be like a communist almost, you know, something really off the wall if you're a vegetarian. So, but of course, you know, as from the hippie point of view, anything that was going to be outside the, you know, so-called normal society, that was attractive. But also to realize, because I had also, although I hadn't fully transitioned into being a vegetarian, I had gotten some understanding that this food called meat was a result of killing an animal. And I loved animals, so I wasn't comfortable with the idea of eating dead animals. So then we saw Janaki was cooking something, and she'd make these little balls and she'd flatten them out, and then she'd put them on the hot stove, and then part of the stove where the fire was open, she'd put them on the griddle, then she'd put them on this open fire, they would blow up. And that was just so fascinating watching this, like, I don't know what it was she was making, but it was so fascinating. And I couldn't wait for dinner to find out, you know, what is this type of food? Well, it turns out it wasn't food, it was prasadam. And so while that was my first prasadam, my first introduction to Krishna prasadam. And while we were eating, then Mukunda said, well, after dinner, there's something else I want to show you. So now it's getting, you know, like interesting for, you know, all these different things happen. Now something else he wants to show us. Okay, well, what will that be? And what that was the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. You know, that beautiful book by Srila Prabhupada into 3 parts that he brought over from India on the Jaladuta, on the boat. And I'm looking at this book, and on the cover, there is this, you know, that cover was really mesmerizing. I think you almost know what the cover of the first canto of the Bhagavatam looks like. And the hippies were very much interested, most of them, in finding out something about the truth. They want, you know, we wanted to know, what is the truth? What is the truth? And we didn't know, there was not consensus whether or not God existed or not. If there was a God, there was a lot of different opinions on that topic. So one opinion is there was no God. Another opinion was everything is God. Another opinion was everyone is God. I'm God, you're God, everybody's God. And that opinion did not appeal to me, because I was thinking, in looking at my life, if I'm God, the world's a mess and there's no hope. So I didn't really agree with that point. And then there was a big movement. God is dead. It was said, I mean, people were saying this, you know, with great conviction. And Time magazine, which is like a very well-known, famous weekly magazine, they had one cover, fully black cover, and then in red, God is dead. So that's how messed up things were and how confused people were. And then I'm looking at, and I was thinking, because I had some experiences in my life that assured me that I was not this body from a very, very young age, like even before I was 10 years old. I understood clearly I wasn't this body, but I didn't know what I was. And that was what I wanted to know is, what am I? And I didn't think I was God. That part was clear to me, but what was I? And in fact, my family would get very annoyed at me asking those kind of, but what am I? What are we? And then my mom would say, just don't ask those questions, So I'm looking at this book, this Srimad Bhagavatam, and I see that there's a big snake with many, many heads, like a big cobra. And the cobra had like coils, and lying in the coils of the cobra was a fellow with blue skin and 4 arms. And I'm looking at that, and who is this? And Mukunda, in a very sober way, said, this is God. And when he told me that, it just was like an amazing thing. Like, I felt like at last I was coming into contact with the truth. So in the Bible, it says God, man is made in the image of God, but, are we really, how much in the image of God are we? I couldn't quite get it. And, but still there must be something there that, connects us with God. And when he said, and if God exists and what would he look like? And here was an answer. And I immediately accepted that. I was like, it was actually very exciting to know here is God. Here's what he looks like. And then when you open the book, there's this beautiful language, which I didn't understand either, Sanskrit. But then each part was transliterated word by word, so you could understand it. And then there was a whole translation. And then was these beautiful purports. So of course, we're just sitting there. I didn't have time to read, but I was turning the pages and I was looking and I was becoming more and more attracted to this. And I saw one phrase that repeated itself over and over, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that was a phrase I'd never heard before, but it made sense. If God existed and he was like a person, or we were like him, he would have to be supreme. So that was the beginning of my attraction. And not only this, so here's the 4-armed guy with blue skin lying on a snake whose heads were like going all over him. There was a flower growing out of the navel of this person who I now learned was God. And it was a lotus flower. And the stem of the lotus was going way, way, way up into the sky. And on top of that lotus flower, sitting on the lotus flower, there was another person with blue skin and 4 arms, but this person also had 4 heads. Of course, that was Lord Brahma. But I was looking at all of this with great wonder and knowing that here was something very extraordinary about to happen in my life. So then Mukunda said, actually, we're on our way to San Francisco. We want to start a temple there. And in my ignorance, I asked, well, what is a temple? And he said very seriously, well, it's a storefront painted white. Because in those days, we never had any like regular source of income, which meant we didn't have a lot of money. And it was fairly easy to rent an empty storefront. They weren't too costly. So the first few temples, that's exactly what it was. It was a storefront painted white. The first thing we would do would be, to freshen up the place, paint it white. So the first temple, of course, was just in New York City, 26 2nd Avenue. And Mukunda said he's going to San Francisco to start another temple. And if he's, would we like to come along and help? So that sounded like a really wonderful thing. But we had a contract with the government. The forestry is under the government. So our contract said we had to stay up there until the first snowfall. And this was about the end of September. So figured, well, it's gonna be a little while before the first snowfall. We hadn't really thought about it before. So we said, okay, well, yeah, we'll come. When it snows, we'll come. So the next morning, I woke up before anyone else, and I went outside. I opened the door to go outside to answer the call of nature. And my God, there was snow on the ground. And not only was there snow all over the ground, I could see right in front of our door the footprints of a mountain lion that had walked past. So I was really excited. Now we can go. It snowed. And I woke everybody up, and everybody was really happy to see that snow. It's not like there was tons of it, but there was snow. And we had this special little contraption that you could communicate to the Forest Service, the headquarters down below. So we, I called them up. I said, okay, we're packing up. We're going to leave. And the guy goes, what are you talking about? You're going to leave? What do you mean? I said, well, it snowed. We're going to leave. And he goes, it didn't snow down here. And I was looking at the contract, and it just said first snowfall. It didn't say it had to snow down in the, where the headquarters were. And then he goes, so I mentioned that, and he goes, well, it won't stay. It's not going to stay. And I looked again on the contract, and it didn't say it had to stay. It just said first snowfall. So I was adamant, well, if the snow was here, we're going to go. So it took us a couple of days. I had a couple of horses that I'd borrowed, and I had to return those to the person I'd borrowed them from. He was in another town, a couple of hours away, and pack up, and we left. And then we arrived in San Francisco, and of course we didn't have an address to go to. Nobody knew we were coming. And even though I had used to live there, I mean, the hippies, we'd move around a lot, so I didn't know for sure who would be still present or not. And first thing we needed to do was find a place to live. So Mukunda and Janaki had a place to live in Berkeley, which was across the bay from San Francisco. So myself and Joan and Sam, we were just like driving, just driving on the street, up and down the streets, looking for a for rent sign. And then I saw a little street, a small street, said Lucky Alley. I said, oh, look, Lucky Alley, let's try that street. And it was a small, short street. And at the end of that street, there was a for rent sign on a building on the left. So I went to the corner, and in those days, in those days, it was a dime. It's called a dime, 10 cents. You'd put it in, make your phone call. So I told the person we're interested, we want to rent that place, and he was fine with that. And so we had a place to stay. And then, the hunt was on, so to speak, to find a place that would be suitable for a temple, an empty storefront. And the kind of the headquarters of the hippies on the West Coast was called Haight-Ashbury. It was a particular neighborhood in San Francisco. And we figured that would be the best place to locate because there were so many young people there coming from all over America, and even Europe. People were coming. Either they would go to New York or they would go to San Francisco. That was kind of the two pockets of the hippie movement at the time. So we did find a place. And in the meantime, just right before we found that place, Joan and I, we thought, well, the Swami's going to come. And when the Swami comes, we're not going to be able to take any trips anymore. That meant like we wouldn't be able to smoke marijuana or take LSD. So let's do our last LSD trip today. So we did that. And when we were, normally I didn't like to do that kind of thing in the city because the city's kind of harsh, but I did it that time. And we're walking back to our place on Lucky Alley. And all of a sudden, this great big, huge German Shepherd dog just jumps out of a porch and starts barking at us really nasty, you know. So then a fellow comes out and he starts going, "Que tal, que tal?" Now in Spanish, that means what? Que tal, what? But it turned out that was the name of the dog, and the dog immediately ran back to its owner. And then the owner's so smiling, and he had some kind of weird robe on, you know, he's like some kind of hippie guy. And he says to us, "Would you like to come in?" And I'm thinking, I don't want to be in some dirty hippie's house with a big barking dog. So I said, "No, thank you." But to my surprise, Joan, she decided to go in. So I said, "Okay, well, see you later." And then the next day, so she spent the night there, and the next day she shows up with this person whose name was Roger and his dog, Ketal. And Sam and I also had a little dog, and our little dog's name was Ralph. And actually, Ralph got Prabhupada's mercy on a few occasions, actually. So then we now had another member of our party to search for a temple, and a little storefront was found, and that became the second temple, the second Hare Krishna temple. It was on 518 Frederick Street. And above that, above the ground floor, this was the ground floor, there was living quarters. So there was apartments upstairs. And Mukunda managed to rent one of those apartments for him and Janaki. And then the other one was rented for Swamiji for when he would come. So things were looking very promising. We were starting to advertise to let people know the Swami's coming. And we didn't really have at that point, well, first we didn't even have the address. Initially, we didn't have the address. So we just made posters saying, "Swami is coming, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Get high forever, no more coming down." We were just passing them out just to like create a buzz. And then we got the address. So then we said, "Swamiji is coming to 518 Frederick Street." But of course, we didn't have a date yet. We didn't know when he was coming, but okay, at least we had an address. And the Swami was coming, and chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Get high forever, no more coming down. Because that was the thing that, you know, the people, they would get their little drugs and get a little high, but you didn't stay high forever. You came down. So we were, you know, trying to appeal to their desire of getting high by saying, you know, get high forever, no more coming down. And then finally, we had the address, and then finally we had a date. On January 17th, Swamiji is coming to 518 Frederick Street, you know. So please come and chant Hare Krishna, stay high forever, no more coming down. And that was kind of how we attracted the first group of people. In just one moment, I forgot to bring here. Yes, so we had this, you know, people came to the airport actually to meet the Swami. And in those days, you could go to the airport, in and out of the airport quite freely. There was restrictions, you know, the whole thing that happened after 9/11 hadn't happened yet, so it was freedom to go. So we were there, about 50 people, you know, not 50 people who were going to become devotees, but curiosity seekers, and some people did become devotees. And also our dog, Ralph, was also there. So there's like a little video. If you Google San Francisco 67, Prabhupada arrival, you will see, so it's a short little clip, but then you'll see Prabhupada arriving at San Francisco airport, and you'll see these scraggly looking people like myself and Shyam Sundar and Alan Ginsberg, who was helping us at the time. And there's little Ralph, he was just bouncing along. And what happened is we were all waiting, and there were people from the newspaper, and they had these, in those days, big cameras. Like now we have these little tiny phones and you can take pictures immediately, right? So these guys, they have these big cameras and there's like big flash on them. There were several of them because Mukunda had been very busy to contact the local newspapers. So they're standing there and all of us are standing there and we're just like looking at every plane that was circling around. Is that the one? Is that the one? And I remember starting to think, well, he's a Swami, and we didn't really know what does it mean to be a Swami. So we're thinking, you know, actually, maybe Swamis, they probably have mystical powers. You know, they could probably fly without an airplane. And I was thinking like that, yeah, we probably didn't even need to buy him a ticket. But then just about that point in time, the plane that was actually carrying Swamiji arrived on the scene and landed. And then we were kind of like leaning forward, like, when will he come out? And it turned out that he was the last person to get off the plane. And when he came out, actually couldn't see him. There was like this blinding light. And, you know, if somebody like a big, powerful light in your face, in your eyes, you can't see for a moment. So it was kind of like that. We just got a little blinded. And not only that, I found myself, and there were some other guests, we were on the floor and we did not know about obeisances. So it's not like we were paying obeisances. I had no idea how I ended up on the floor. And as I kind of looked up, I saw these 2 feet in white plastic shoes with kind of pointy toes kind of walking by. But often you'll hear how he glided. He was gliding by. And that was really the fact. He didn't, you know, we walk kind of clump, 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 and he was just gliding by. And then I'm still on the floor. I'm just looking at those beautiful feet. And then right behind him was our little dog, Ralph, following behind him. And I remember thinking, wow, that dog is smarter than me. He's on his feet following the Swami, and I'm sitting here on the floor. But we all started following him. And that was kind of interesting because, you know, he's a guest. It's his first time. Actually, it was the first time he ever flew in an airplane because he came to America on a freighter. So this is the first time he ever flew in an airplane, right? And he's walking, leading the way, and we're all following him, but he's never been there before. So that was, you know, something that was interesting. He was like, Prabhupada was never bewildered. He was never like, where am I? He was always really self-assured. And we had one fellow, his name was Harvey Cohen, and he had a Cadillac. So in those days, a Cadillac was considered quite a good car to have. And it was a big black Cadillac. So he was picking Swamiji up in that big black Cadillac. And the rest of us had different type of vehicles. And there was one vehicle that belonged to the temple. I had gotten it as a donation. It was a 54 Ford. And we had taken stencils, and all over the car it said, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And so Prabhupada walked right to that car, you know, and I was, you know, I was kind of amazed, like, you know, he goes right to that car, but then they said, no, you know, come in this other car. And we all went, you know, from the airport to the temple, the little temple. And when we entered that little temple, it was already packed with people because our advertising had worked really well and people were there. It was full of different types of people, you know, people actually in suits and ties, people like, well, the hippies were very colorful and they would often dress up as some character, the famous character in history. People, they would dress up. There was like a lot of people like Jesus Christ. They would, you know, imagine this is what Christ would be like, and they would dress like that. They were quite attracted to Native American Indians, so there would be quite a few dressed up like Native American Indians, and people like Cleopatra, you know, so it was a colorful group of people there. And Srila Prabhupada came and sat down on a little platform that we had built. We didn't even know the word Vyasa sign at that point, but it was a little wooden platform with a cushion on it. And there was a little holder for the books. Mukunda had suggested there should be a holder, and we called that platform the dais. So he sat and he looked at everybody, nodded his head, picked up his kartals and began a kirtan. And after the kirtan, again, he's looking out at the audience, and again, very, you know, many hippies were there. And another aspect of the hippie mindset, the hippie sampradaya, was they really wanted, in addition to trying to find truth, they wanted to find peace and love. So just like we go, Hare Krishna, hippies would go like this: peace and love, brother. Peace and love, sister. They would go like this. So, you know, with that, you know, knowing that was the mindset, what Prabhupada said was very astounding. The first thing he tells them is, there is no peace, there is no love in the material world. And, you know, that was, for me, I took it really, I was like, that makes sense, because we're trying to find love, we're trying to find peace. We weren't finding it, well, because it's not there. But still, for some of these other people, that might have been a bit shocking to hear that, you know. But then he started speaking so beautifully and so eloquently about the source of true love and the source of peace, Lord Krishna. So he didn't leave us stranded. There's no love, there's no peace. No, he gave us a great description of love and peace, something very hopeful to look forward to. And then on the next, he ended with another kirtan, and on that second kirtan was very enthusiastic. People had now heard something, and they enthusiastically joined in the kirtan. And following the kirtan, somebody suddenly brought out a plate of fruit with some apples and oranges that were cut into little pieces. And Prabhupada was, Swamiji, as we were still calling him, was handing these pieces of fruit to each member, and everybody was just coming up like it was a wonderful, wonderful, magical moment. So just like I had my first prasadam at the top of a mountain, these people were now getting their first piece of prasadam directly from the lotus hands of Srila Prabhupada. So it was a very wonderful experience. And one of the things that I noticed, sorry. So as he was speaking, so as I said, eloquently and beautifully, what we were feeling from him, we were feeling love emanating from him, but it was not the kind of foolish, false love that we were accustomed to. This was something else. And it was as if he loved us. We were feeling like he loved us, and we were finding ourselves falling in love with him. So that was the first in-person meeting that I had with Srila Prabhupada. And within a couple of days, we got initiated, myself and Sam and Harvey Cohen and Hope. Hope was formerly Harvey Cohen's girlfriend. So, of course, I became Malati Devi Dasi, and Sam became Shamsundar Das. Harvey Cohen became Hari Das, and Hope became Harsharani. And along with Mukunda and Janaki and Joan and Roger chose not to get initiated at that time. They waited a few weeks, and later they became Jamuna and Gurudas. But we were the beginning hands and legs of the San Francisco Yatra, and it was a marvelous time to be in a situation where something revolutionary was happening. That here was a personality who was delivering the absolute truth to young, crazy people who could hardly understand anything, yet he spoke in such a convincing, pure manner that we were fully attracted and willing to try to understand and accept the teachings he was giving to us. So I don't know if, like it's 1 hour. I don't know if you want to go over time, or if not, I can stop here.
I think we can continue. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the first things, just 1 second here, and see something. Okay. So one of the first things we did, we realized now we had this little storefront, and there was a signage. And Mukunda had told us that in New York, Prabhupada had told him to write Radha Krishna Temple and put that on the front. So we also had that sign, Radha Krishna Temple. But we didn't know what we got it. Krishna is God, but who's this Radha? So, so who's Radha? And Krishna, Prabhupada is looking at all of these young people, various states of bewilderment. And he just said it in such a way that we could kind of grasp it. He goes, Radha is Krishna's girlfriend. That was like, simple explanation to a new group of people. So one of the things we realized, the first initiation, I can tell you a little something about that, is that, of course, we hadn't seen an initiation, and we had kind of heard that there would be a fire in the temple, which we thought that was kind of, exciting, that we would have a fire in the temple. And I got a list of things that needed to be present for the initiation ceremony, which included some sand, some colored powders, 5 pounds of butter. And I was like, 5 pounds of butter, because butter is expensive. What's that for? And one of the New York people, so a few people, 3 or 4 people from New York had showed up. So I said, what is this for? And he goes, put it on the fire. And again, my foolish American, ignorant mind, whoa, what a waste, waste 5 pounds of butter by pouring it on the fire. No, at that point, not understanding the meaning of yajna, of sacrifice. So that, and lots of incense, had to have incense, you had to have flowers, and you had to have fruit. So I got all that stuff together. And the day of the initiation had also been advertised that there was going to be a Vedic ceremony, a Vedic initiation ceremony, and everybody was invited. So again, there was just a full house. And in the center of it all was this little fire pit, and Swamiji on one side, we were on the other side. And we just didn't, when you haven't seen something and you've only heard about it, you can only imagine. But this was just such a, it was so out of the box, we couldn't even really imagine what was going to happen, how it was going to happen. But for example, in those days, the kuntimala, we didn't put it on until the day of initiation, and then it was tied on. Now there's like little screws to clasp it on. In those days, you tied a very tight knot, and we called them our dog collar. We were becoming Swamiji's dogs, said with real affection. This, once this went on, that was it. And so incense, hippies liked incense, and for some reason we had the idea there should be lots of it. So there was so much of it that there was like a cloud, and then on top of that, then there was this fire. So we didn't want to open the door to let some of the smoke out, because then we were a little concerned that maybe somebody might think there was a fire, which there was, but that they might call the fire department or the police. So the door was shut tight, and we're in there, and we were told that everyone should chant Hare Krishna. And at that point, not everybody actually knew all the words in the right order. So it was kind of scrambled, but people were trying their best to chant. And then Prabhupada spoke a little, and honestly, it was very difficult to understand his English at that point in time. His English had a Scottish accent to it, mixed with the Bengali accent, this was our first time to meet him under the circumstance. So it was a little difficult to remember anything that he actually said at that point. But then somebody came up, and I saw these neck beads are coming closer and closer to my neck. And I was thinking, okay, if those go in my neck, that's it. I don't know, am I ready? Am I ready for this? And I looked over, well, the door was over there. If I wasn't ready, now was the time to get up and get out, but I stayed. And then the beads went around my neck. And part of the initiation ceremony actually is we strung our own beads, including the neck beads. And our chanting beads were big red beads that we got at a craft shop, because nowadays you can get anything you want from India at your local temple, practically speaking. But that type of interaction hadn't occurred yet. So we would make these beads, and if you look at the old pictures, you see these big red beads around, we put them around our neck. So the beads, Kunti Mala went on, we had our beads that had been chanted on by Swamiji. What was next? Well, next thing, somebody handed us a banana. And not having seen this fire yagi before, we didn't know what to do, but okay, it's a banana. So we started to peel it and peel the banana. We didn't, and right away said, no, you put it on the fire. Okay, so we'd already poured all that ghee on the fire, that 5 pounds of butter that was turned into ghee. Now we're going to put fruit on the fire. This is a very expensive fire. And of course, all the grains that we'd been requested to get, barley and sesame and rice, wheat grains, all that on the fire. And we were, of course, given new names, which were a little bit difficult to hear at first. So the first thing most of us did after the ceremony was, what's my name? What's my name? But so now we got the bananas on the fire, and then Swamiji is like, we heard him say something like, Bonum, Bodum, and we couldn't understand what he was asking us to do. So we looked at Haridas, the former Harvey Cohn, now Haridas, because he was going to be our temple president. And we figured he would know what to do. So what he did is he got on his knees and bent forward. So we got on our knees and we bent forward. And then he started blowing on the fire. So we were also blowing on the fire. And that caused the smoke to separate. And through the smoke, we could see Swamiji's face. And his eyes were just like, whoa, like looking big. Now, in general, there wasn't too much we could do to shock him or surprise him. I mean, after all, he was 24 hours a day in contact with Krishna, Yogeshwar, the supreme mystic, Krishna, who at the age of 7 lifted an entire mountain with his little pinky finger, who expanded himself 16,000 times and became the husband of 16,000 princes. I mean, he was used to unusual things. But every once in a while we would surprise him. So when we were blowing on that fire, and we could tell when he was surprised because his eyes would get really like big, So when the fire separated and we were looking and we saw the big eyes, we stopped blowing because we figured out that's not what what he wanted us to do. He was actually trying to tell us to bow down, bow down, bow down, bow down, but we just didn't get it. So instead of, he didn't get upset. He realized we didn't get it, and he picked up his kartals They just started Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Because at least that much we could do, you know. But that shows what extraordinary compassion Srila Prabhupada had, and what extraordinary faith he had in Gauranga Mahaprabhu's mission, that he was willing to try and take these totally uncultured young men and women and give them the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and introduce us to Bhakti Yoga, to devotional service, you know. So there was some amusing experiences. One day, a lady got through the doors to go upstairs to where the apartments were. And she, because the doors actually had a lock, you had to be buzzed in, but maybe somebody was going in and she jumped in back behind them, but somehow she knew where Swamiji's apartment was, and she went up and she started banging on his door. And he opens the door and she pushed her way in. And she was a little bit crazed, you could say, you know, probably under some influence. And she goes, Swamiji, will you marry me? And Prabhupada was, I can't marry you. I'm a sannyasi, you know. And she didn't look like she was going to leave. So he decided to go to Mukunda's apartment, because Mukunda would know what to do. But as he left, the door closed and it locked, and he didn't have a key. So then, you know, he told Mukunda what had happened. And Mukunda was going over with the key, but Janaki, who had a very, very wonderful relationship, a spontaneous, affectionate relationship with Srila Prabhupada. And there was no Ashwarya, no awe and veneration. She was more like motherly. And mothers can, you know, chastise their sons. So she goes, Swamiji. She's shaking his finger at Swamiji, you must never leave your apartment without your key. Whenever you leave, you must have your key with you. So she had this kind of sweet ras with Prabhupada. One time Prabhupada had asked for some dried milk. So in our Western country, we have like dried milk, we call it powdered milk. So it was assumed that's what he meant. But actually, he was referring to koa. And koa is, you can get that at sweet shops in India. They cook the milk down till it actually becomes, it's not powdered dry, but it's firm and it's like all the liquid is dried out. So it's like firm. And the devotees, not knowing that, they brought powdered milk. So he tried to powdered milk, and he got an idea. He made something, and then he called Janaki and he goes, so try this. So it was just like a little round ball. And so he gave it to her. So what do you think? And she was tasting it. She goes, Swamiji, this is simply wonderful. And this was the introduction of Simply Wonderfuls into our daily lives, into our new cooking experience. So it was just, you know, some powdered sugar, the dried milk, and butter, mixed equal parts of each. And those became a fixture. Nowadays, people are having different type of diets. You know, if there's butter, oh no, we're vegan. If there's sugar, oh no, we don't take sugar. So you're missing out on some really wonderful early day recipes. And this one in particular, that Srila Prabhupada himself had come up with a solution, what to do with this powdered milk, you know, the devotees had brought. And one other time she had made this kind of like a mixture of whipped cream and some fruit. And she brings it to him and he goes, what is this? She goes, this is Krishna's surprise. And he was thinking that the whipped cream, he was thinking it was yogurt. She goes, no, it's whipped cream. And he's looking, oh, yogurt. And he goes, no, whipped cream. And she puts some on a spoon. Here, you taste it. And he goes, oh, whipped cream, very nice. So that became, this Krishna surprise became another one of our little staples when we'd have a feast, Krishna surprise would be there, different things. So we were very fortunate to have this opportunity of closeness and see how Srila Prabhupada interacted with all of us, with different persons who would come and see him, how he would approach different situations. One time when I was down in the kitchen cooking with Janaki, a letter came for Swamiji. It was what we call an aerogram, which was like a one-piece sheet of paper with a stamp already on it. And you would fold it up and you'd have a letter with, like a one-piece letter, made its own envelope. And it was from India. So Janaki was always curious, like, wow, I wonder what this is. Let's take it up to him. So we turned off the stove. We ran up the stairs. Actually, there was an elevator to his place. But because we were young, we were like so young and strong, we could run faster than the elevator. So we never took the elevator. We'd like run up those stairs. We knock on the door and he opens the door and Janaki goes, Swamiji, you have a letter from India. And he took the letter and she's like, well, Swamiji, aren't you going to read it? So to please her, he opened it up. He read the letter. Well, Swamiji, is it good news? Good news, Swamiji? And he goes, yes. And she's like, well, what is it? She didn't say it, but he could understand she wanted to know. So he goes, oh, my sister has died. And we were like, that's good news. And he could see by our faces, we were a little shocked. And he goes, but she was a devotee. She went back to Godhead. And it was just such a marvelous moment to realize how extraordinary this Krishna consciousness was, and how it was able to address any situation in life in a wonderful way, that death was not something to be feared if you're a devotee. It was something that we could wonderfully embrace because we would be going back home, back to Godhead. So that moment was, Swamiji was very precious to have that direct interaction like that. Yeah, there's not so much time now. First Rath Yatra happened around that time in July of 67, maybe another time I can relate that because it's a wonderful story. The finding of the deities, Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev, so many wonderful things happened. One thing that was kind of instructive and funny at the same time, a little bit funny, was, the hippies had this idea that nothing belongs to anybody. And we actually say the same thing. We don't own anything. It all belongs to Krishna. The hippies didn't get the Krishna part, but they got the idea. Nothing, we're not the proprietors of the universe. And as such, many of us, myself included, had this habit of taking things that didn't belong to us, but they don't belong to anybody. So it was okay if I take it. Actually, that's called stealing. But we were not calling it stealing. We were calling it liberating. We were liberating this item, whatever it would be. So, in Krishna consciousness, you have this dovetailing, you can do anything for Krishna. So I was thinking, yeah, I'm doing the cooking and it's also up to me to get the boga, the food to cook. And we don't usually have so much money, but, I know how to liberate things. So I would go to the store, and I would get a big basket. I would just pile everything in the basket, and then I'd walk out the store without going through the cash register. In other words, I was stealing, but I was thinking it was okay. It was liberating, and it was for Krishna. So I was thinking it was okay. And we found out, like, we didn't want to use cheap old cooking oil anymore. We wanted to use liquid gold, which was how Prabhupada described ghee. But ghee meant butter. Butter was very costly. So I saw an opportunity, and I saw that this opportunity must be Krishna's arrangement. So what was that arrangement? Every day, a dairy truck would pull up right in front of the temple. And the driver would get out with a tray, and he'd go to the back of the truck, open the door, fill his tray. And because his hands now were on the tray, he couldn't lock the door. He'd just like use his elbow and shut the door. It was like a small door, and walk across to the street to a little corner store. So why did I think this was Krishna's arrangement? Well, there was butter in that truck. So he goes across, I go out to the truck, I open the door, I take 2 pounds of butter. And I'm thinking this is perfectly fine. I didn't take more than 2 pounds because all I needed was 2 pounds. And I'd already learned about Isavashamidam Sarvam. Don't take more than you need. Just take what you need and leave aside the rest for others. So 5 days a week, I took 2 pounds of butter. Let's say 10 pounds of butter a week, and that would get us through the weekend. And I was thinking there was nothing wrong with that because it was for Krishna. And one day I was in Swamiji's apartment, which looks over the street. And it was just, he would always ask us different things. So he asked, Malati, every day I see you were going to one truck, what are you doing? He was just curious. But when he asked me, I suddenly thought, oh, actually what I'm doing is stealing. And I didn't quite know how to say that. I didn't want to say that, So I was trying to think of how I could say it without lying, but not say I was stealing. So I said, well, I'm getting butter. Because that part was true. I was getting butter. And then Swami goes, oh, yes, Krishna was also a butter thief. So when he said that, I had this overwhelming realization. Yes, Krishna could steal butter, but I shouldn't be imitating Krishna. Even though up until that point, I didn't know about Krishna and the butter thief part. Still, I got that understanding because at least I had, come to understand that even though God can come in a human-like form, he never acts like a conditioned human being, and everything he does is perfectly wonderful and pleasing to his devotees. But, so that was that day was the end of my stealing. I didn't do it anymore after that. So a lesson without, with no finger shaking, he taught me a good lesson. Yes, Krishna was a butter thief, but I wasn't, I shouldn't, and we shouldn't imitate Krishna, So maybe take a stop here. I have a group of young people that have come, 26 of them. They're having a little retreat here and I'm facilitating. So I have to rejoin them. They've come from Columbus and from Pittsburgh. And for many of them, it's their first full-on exposure to Krishna consciousness. So it's a New Vrindavan. The New Vrindavan is a mystically wonderful place, the land of Lord Krishna. The cows, you've heard the peacocks. There's deer that come walking around quite freely. And of course, there's Shri Radha Vrindavan Chandra, Shri Gornitai, Jagannath Subhadra Baladev, Srinathji, and a beautiful, beautiful large murti of Sri Nrsingadev. And of course, we all know next week is the appearance of Lord Nrsingadev. And we'll be having a wonderful festival here. And it's very unique, the festival, how we celebrate Nrsingadev, because our Nrsingadev, he's not Ugra. Ugra means angry. The Nrsingadev in Mayapur, that's Ugra Nrsinga. But our Nrsingadev is in a very peaceful pose. And Prahlad Maharaj is there with his folded hands. But on Nrsinga Chattardasi, he suddenly, for a little while, assumes his Ugra form. And there's a pillar that's placed behind him. And there's these lights that just go, and there's a roaring of a lion, and there's lots of fake smoke coming out. And suddenly, you know, there is Hiranyakashipu on his lap being ripped apart by Lord Nrsingadev. So it's a very exciting festival. It's really wonderful to see Lord Nrsingadev in action. And always keep in mind that just Prabhupada explained to us about Lord Nrsingadev. He said, when the demons, the atheists, when they see that fearful form, they're afraid, they run away. But devotees were feeling completely protected and happy to see that fierce form. And he said, it's just like a policeman. If the policeman's in the uniform, when a bad person sees a policeman, oh, let me get out of here. But when a good person, a good citizen sees a policeman, they feel protected. Of course, nowadays, that's not always the case, but just for the analogy. So Lord Nrsingadev, his fearful form is, it causes the demons to flee, and it causes the devotees to feel great satisfaction and great protection. Hare Krishna. I'll tell one other thing too. When Prabhupada, he wanted a painting of Lord Nrsingadev. And of course, nobody had ever seen Nrsingadev before. So just going by Prabhupada's description, Swamiji's description. And the devotee that did the painting was told there should be blood, but, you know, we're thinking, oh, that's kind of, you know, so she just put some little tiny dabs of blood. And when Prabhupada looked at the picture, he goes, more blood, more blood. He said he just got ripped apart, more blood. So thank you very much for allowing me to share some time with you. And perhaps we can meet again. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Malati Mataji, for coming and enlightening us with this wonderful speech. Is there time for some questions?
If you have, it can take a few minutes, yeah.
Is there any questions in anyone's mind that you would like to ask Malati Mataji now? If not, then I would have one question, but it is a little bit outside the topic. Is it okay?
Yeah, sure.
Because there's the ISKCON Vaishnavi ministry, could you just very briefly explain how does it work, and can we approach to someone, for example, for devotee care, or which type of?
Okay, have you seen the web page for the, it's called ISKCON Vaishnavi Ministry, that we have a page on Facebook?
Yeah.
And you'll find all kinds of resources there. And we are looking for representatives in every area, every country, and in some places like, you know, like America is so big, so we have more than one. But if somebody would be interested, go to the webpage, look, read the information that's there. There's so many topics that are discussed, and archived there that you can read about, find out what is the ISKCON position, what is the ministry position. But the main thing of the ministry is to assist ladies to engage in Krishna service. That we have a firm belief that every lady has the right to serve Krishna. And that's because of our experience with Srila Prabhupada, that he engaged us in Krishna service. So you could go to the ministry, and you might consider, if there is somebody there who is proficient in translating, contact the ministry and consider translating into establishing your own web page of the ministry into your language, into Finnish. So, and also with regards to a bond of love, you know, if anybody wants to do translations here, we're happy to have people translate. We're not doing this book to make money for ourselves. It's not at all that way. We are trying to expose people to Srila Prabhupada, and in doing that, you'll also get exposed to the wonderful, wonderful ladies who were present and were his disciples. So if there's anybody interested, and one thing you could do, you could just take like one story, maybe once a week, translate one story and then put it up on the Finnish Facebook page of the ministry. Before we printed the book, we were posting the interviews on the Facebook website of the ministry. But look at the ministry, look at the different options that are there, and consider how you might want to be involved. And then you can contact the Radha Dasi is the head of the ministry, and you can contact her through the Facebook, and we're trying to get as many people from various regions, various countries. So we would really welcome you to be part of the ministry. And if there's somebody you feel that would be able to represent the ministry, then you can discuss that with Radha Dasi. Like in North America, we have Govinda Priya. There's people that for Latin America and South America. So why not Finland? Bring Finland on board. You know, we are not feminist. We are working in harmony with ISKCON. Therefore, it's a recognized ministry of ISKCON, and Radha Dasi sits on the GBC as the ministry representative. So it's a valuable service, and I hope that maybe somebody there might be interested to become a little more involved.
Oh, I'm very sure about that. Thank you so much, dear Mataji, for this wonderful opportunity. At least I personally will go through the website. Yes. And we have had some translation projects. I'm not sure if our small translation team is here at the moment. We have translated Visakha Mataji's book, What's a Woman to Do, in Finnish. And currently I'm translating Chintamani Mataji's improving-sangha.com website in Finnish as well. And making that kind of translation project. So translations are also possible to make, yes, definitely. Okay. And it would be so wonderful to be involved with the Vaishnavi ministry as well. So
the ministry is international in scope, and it gives a resource for devotees to connect to, especially like maybe yours is a smaller country, you don't have as much, you know, like a large sangha, but still there's a whole sangha out there, of wonderful Vaishnavis, and the ministry is another platform of connecting, and also connecting to service through the ministry.
If any of the ladies here are interested in doing this type of service, translations, and being involved with the Vaishnavi ministry, we can also have a meeting about that together.
Yeah, why don't you go through the webpage, see if, like, if you have questions, you can first just, message me, and then find out who might be interested to actually become a little more actively involved.
Yes, that's very nice. Thank you. I will inquire from the ladies in our WhatsApp group if they have interest, and especially if they have time. I understand that some of the ladies in our congregation, they have, big things in their lives. They have, husband candidates and, babies due, some of them have. So some are very busy, but like here we can see there's still ladies who are active and very enthusiastically with us. So yeah, I'm sure that there will be a nice team for this.
Right. And I mean, another thing is in doing this, it wouldn't be, sometimes when you have a project, it has to start and end at a certain time. But this would be a little more relaxed. So even if you have a lot to do, let's say you could give an hour a week, or, maybe that would be possible for someone to just, and if a lot of people do that, things can happen very nicely.
Yes, that sounds very good. Very good.
It doesn't have to be on one person's shoulder, And
Very
then once it's established, then it's just a little maintenance in terms of, somebody would have to just oversee it, but that's not like a daily event, just keep new content, keep, if something gets posted. And, also just, we don't, it's not a closed, our Facebook page is not closed. It means anybody, including men, because we want men to be aware of the ministry. We want them to be aware of the topics that are being discussed. It can only benefit the movement. So, that's something to keep in mind too.
Yes, thank you very much. Wonderful new opportunities for us here in Finland as well to also bring our, rare language and this opportunity to stay here in Finland as well, in the awareness of people around the world like this, to have our Finnish translated websites and, activities going on. So thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. All glories to Prabhupada, all glories to all of you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much.
Haribol.